Hi, I'm Anna Marie Cox. And Dan, can I interest you in some raw corn?
Sure.
Would you like to chow down on some raw corn?
I mean, if the alternative is nothing, then, I'm just going to say.
Well, there's kind of melons that fall from trees. I don't know. I'm very...
Yeah. Hi, I'm Daniel Dresner, and I left the 20th century, Anna, with no regrets.
Welcome to Space the Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of...
intersubjective, interspecies understanding.
And somatic hypermutation. Today we'll be talking about the original Planet of the Apes from 1968. Mm-hmm. It is available on Starz, or you can rent it.
Pretty much anywhere.
From all the various places you can rent things. Mm-hmm. And we're having April.
Let's not lean on that too hard, but yes, you all got it. You all got it. It's the latter half of April, Yeah.
Yeah, it is turning into MAPE. Sorry, Dan. I have a better time with idea of what we're doing than what we're doing.
You know what they say, April flowers, Bing, MAPE, monkey poop, I don't know.
In the next few weeks, we'll be talking about this whole saga, War for Planet of the Apes, mm-hmm. and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Yes. And there are other ape movies we could do.
We will still not, if after we've done this, there will still be a majority of ape movies we have not covered, just to be clear.
That's right. So maybe we'll do April again.
Could happen. Absolutely could.
All right. If you are not already, please consider becoming a patron, because among other things, you can have sort of a greater say in what we'll be doing next, because the place that we get a lot of our suggestions from, or at least pay the most attention to, mm-hmm. is our Discord, which I think both of us, Dan, feel like that's the one of the three major reasons to become a patron. I consider it it's up there. It's really high.
I think it might very well be
you get episodes early.
You get early episodes, you get access to our AUAs, and of course you get to listen to this podcast without advertisements. So those are all good things.
You can stick it to capitalism.
Yeah.
You can pay workers directly, and that's maybe the number one thing. But also there's solidarity, Dan. There's solidarity on the Discord. The Discord has all kinds of conversations in it, and I wanted to highlight the fact that we have a kind of mental health channel in our Discord. Mm-hmm. And it's been good lately. People kind of sharing what they're going through and getting a lot of support. I think for quite a few of our Discord members, the Discord has taken the place of some of the things that have become less friendly in our social media sphere.
You know what? Here's the way I would put it. There has not been an ape patron that I have not liked. So, they're all lovely. Regular patrons.
There's not been an... Did you say an ape patron?
Yes, I was making a joke there, Anna. If you recall. I made Anna laugh.
That's not a very good joke, Dan.
Well, you're a little laughing real hard, though.
I'm laughing at how terrible a joke it was. But enough. All right.
More
so I think
seriously,
we've been through reasons to become a patron.
Yeah.
Become a patron. And Dan, how are you?
I am good, Anna, actually. It is warming up here finally. The leaves are starting to come out, which is always a wonderful moment around here. It's spring. And also, I can see the end of the semester. I am almost done with, drafting lecture notes. And, it's the start of the summer for me, which means, I just have a whole shit ton of more writing assignments, but I'm looking forward to actually concentrating on those. So that'll be good. How about yourself, Anna?
I'm all right. I was thinking, when historians and archaeologists come and go through our records, Dan, and perhaps watch videos of our podcast,
find our glasses.
The way that they can find our glasses, the way that they can date them is by what my hair is doing. Because you've been with me now through 2 sets of bangs.
This is true.
Can you believe that?
I
am now growing out the bangs that I cut last winter.
That is extraordinary. Wow. So we are in the third post-Bangs era.
We're in the well, it depends on if you count my original time on the show as the first post-Bang era, because I did have bangs before that.
Okay.
So you're going through your second post-Bang era with me. So
it's been...
I welcome another reason to become a patron, Dan.
It's been a roller coaster, Anna. I mean, there's just no other way to put it.
Patrons can join me on my hair journey.
Okay. Why are we doing this, Anna? I think the answer, in part, let us be very clear, this is decidedly a schlock or awe episode. In fact, you could argue the whole concept of schlock or awe was made for this entire franchise, or at least for the original Planet of the Apes. And, obviously, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is coming out soon. And as sci-fi series go, this one has demonstrated surprising sustainability. I would not have thought that they'd be able to resuscitate this. But this is now the fourth film that is coming out in the sort of modern, takes on this. My take, just to, give it away at the beginning, I think asking whether this is schlock or awe is actually wrong. This is clearly schlock and awe. It manages to be both.
I think that perhaps one way we should start and continue to frame our schlock or awe episodes is actually that there's a schlock or awe spectrum, Dan.
Okay.
It's not just a binary.
Right.
There is
absolutely.
a schlock or awe spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, this is mostly schlock with a side of awe.
Oh, see, this is where we disagree. I think this is actually a fair amount of awe
you would put
schlock.
It on the spectrum. You would put it like 90% awe.
Oh, I wouldn't go 90%. Let's not be like, no. There's some pretty cheesy stuff. Let me put it this way. I guess I would say 2/3 awe, 1/3 schlock. That would be my ratio.
That's I mean, I maybe go 3/4 schlock and 1/4 awe. I mean, I agree there's awe in there. And speaking of what's in there, Dan, will this podcast ruin it for people?
So, there is a plot twist in this film, Anna. Maybe people probably don't know about it. I don't know. If you have never heard of the plot twist for Planet of the Apes, well, congratulations for living in a cave for the last, 55, 7 years.
Congratulations on your low impact off the grid lifestyle.
Yes. In all seriousness, if you have never heard of this plot twist, for the love of God, go see them, watch the movie before listening to this. I don't want to be responsible for ruining this for you. Obviously, everyone, knows beyond that. I actually do think that this is a movie that is worth watching again, in the sense of probably most people have seen like the ending, and maybe they haven't actually watched the whole film. And it's also a weird period piece in a lot of ways. And so I think in that sense, it's also interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very much of its time.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
It's of its time. And we'll talk
and
about it.
Its influence is
tremendous.
Hard to overstate.
Yeah.
And I can also say, if you haven't seen it, even if you know the ending, yes, you should watch it.
Yeah.
It still has its pleasures, no matter if you know what's coming or not.
I think the fair way to put it is that this movie has like a legitimate legacy within sci-fi. It has also been a movie that has been satirized to death. I mean, it is impossible to talk about this film without thinking of the Simpsons version of it, among other things. Not to mention like Anchorman and God knows other, ways in which you've seen it sort of satirized. And so it in some ways, it again, both awe and schlock. That's the way I'd put it. Speaking of which, what is your previous experience with this film, Anna?
Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius. Dr. Zaius. Help me, Dr. Zaius.
I love you, Dr. Zaius.
That and every other pop culture, reference. I was thinking, I think in Loki, I think there's a Statue of Liberty in like the Forbidden Zone or whatever where they go.
Oh, the final void. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there is. But people are sticking Statue of Liberties everywhere. Like that is the reference, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just the Heston of it all.
Yes. Also, I was saying, you brought up Dr. Zaius, which is obviously one of the times the Simpsons mocked it. For me, it will always be when Dan Castellana in the Homer Goes to Space episode where, as Homer, he goes, "You maniacs! You up! Damn you! Damn you all to hell!" It's just You know,
Wow,
I laugh
that's some
every time.
real powerful Stanislavski method there
There
for
we go.
you, Dan. What did you call upon in order to express that rage?
I've watched that scene enough that every time it just kills me.
Right.
The Homer version of it, it's priceless. It really is.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to the story behind the story. Anna, whatever you think about this film, there is no denying there was a decent amount of talent behind the making of it, as well as Richard Zanuck's girlfriend.
Yes. Nova, dear Nova.
Yes.
Or whatever her name actually was before Heston named her.
Well, to be fair, if they were all mute, do you think she actually had a name for herself? That's an interesting...
She might have had something that she thought of herself as.
Entirely possible. I'm not denying that. I just, we'll never know.
It just sort of signifies the entire relationship, as it were. So, such as it is between him and her.
How dare you? How dare you? Taylor taught her how to smile. I mean...
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I did laugh out loud.
His monologue to her is...
Oh, that is something. That is...
I will reference that later.
Yes. Very good. Looking forward to that. Go. Yeah.
So there are actually 2 documentaries about the making of this movie. And I have not watched them. I think I'll watch them now. But just doing this reading, I was not prepared for how deeply it reverberates through pop culture. It extends further and deeper than I realized. If you're curious, watch the doc yourself or read the many articles out there about it. I will go through some of the wilder and more significant things. It is based on a 1963 book. And Dan, will you say this? I think you speak French.
I do.
And I do not.
It is La Planète des Singes,
which is Planet of the Monkeys. By former spy and French resistance fighter Pierre Boulle. Who you might also know or might know better as the author of Bridge on the River Kwai.
Oh, which is a great goddamn movie. Yeah.
And from what I understand, it was bestseller, but both of these books were bestsellers. I mean, he contains multitudes, clearly.
Yeah.
The first draft of the script was written by Rod Serling, who went through several drafts trying to achieve a movie version of the big twist in the book, which is the same idea, which is that it's apes that are running the society,
right?
But how do you do that visually? Because in the book, what happens, the book is premised on these 2 travelers, they're actually like on a leisure voyage to Beetlejuice, a couple, and they find a literal message in a bottle in space. And it's the document of a journalist who had been on Earth, and he tells the story of being on a spaceship and crashing back into a planet that is run by apes.
Yeah.
And that, and then he leaves that planet and gets this missive off. And then they finish reading the missive. And then there's the reveal is that the female of the couple looks into the mirror and adjusts her silky ears and her, beautiful chimpanzee, jaw. And it turns out that the 2 space travelers are apes as well.
Interesting.
So that's the big reveal in the book, is that the place that he has come from is Earth. The place like he's described. So
yeah.
Anyway, it's the same-ish reveal, but done in a way that you couldn't do. Well, you could do in a movie, but what's the best way to do the reveal?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Oh, there's actually a double reveal in the book, but I'm not going to get into it.
I was going to say, because I knew that the final ending in the book is actually the same as the Tim Burton version of Planet of the Apes.
Of the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. Oh, it's the Lincoln Memorial in the movie, but yeah, it's the same.
Okay, and because it's a French guy.
Exactly.
In the book, it's the Eiffel Tower, but I guess there's like a double twist,
there is,
right?
Yes.
Because like you think that it might be humans that have picked up this missive in space, but really it's just another set of apes. So.
Interesting. Okay.
Anyway. All right. So after Serling's work, it went into the hands of screenwriter Michael Wilson, who was then an Academy Award winner for Place in the Sun, but had already moved to Europe because he was blacklisted in 1952 for refusing to testify at the House Committee on Un-American Activities. And he's got quite the resume. He was a co-writer of It's a Wonderful Life, not credited, but not credited because he was under studio contract at the time, not because he had been blacklisted in the 30s. That
Right.
would be
That would
weird.
have been strange.
But he's uncredited for Lawrence of Arabia and Bridge on the River Kwai.
Oh, hey, okay.
Now, what's interesting about that is Boole won an Academy Award for that adaptation despite not speaking English, because he was the only credited scriptwriter. The Motion Picture Academy added Carl Foreman, another blacklisted writer, and Wilson's name to the award in 1984.
Good.
One of the major changes that Wilson incorporated was a big switch. The biggest switch from Serling's script was to have the apes have a less technologically advanced society.
Right. In Serling's first draft,
script,
they were like, it was like a space going like ape culture, right? Or like they were very.
They had picked up where humans had left off.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Basically. Right. I believe it is Serling that later pointed out they could have made the movie for cheaper had they not changed the technological side, because they could have just filmed it on location somewhere.
Maybe, although this is where I'm going to say, like, by changing the technology, whether they'd either gone forward or backward, I think that actually works better for the movie. If it had been the exact same thing, I think it would have been, you know, a little more disorienting. But that's
I think his argument was like it'd be easier to like give people like slightly like do a Star Trek kind of thing where you just have like around the edges technological changes, and you wouldn't have had to change. You wouldn't have to build whole sets.
Yeah.
Which is what they did. It was a very expensive movie. The film won an Oscar for makeup, is considered to be one of the most influential movies ever made for its advances in prosthetics.
And as a connection, got to point out, John Chambers won the Academy Award. This is the same guy who appears in the film Argo. He was the sort of Hollywood contact. He's played by John Goodman in that film. He was the Hollywood contact that helped set up the sort of dummy film that allowed them to rescue the hostages. Just had to point that out.
A lot of famous alumni from the makeup department on this movie. In fact, the reason why there's so many alumni from this movie is that it was such a labor-intensive process to do these prosthetics that they ran out of makeup artists in Hollywood to employ and had to run a kind of makeup school on set and train newcomers to do the prosthetics. There's a quote, I think it might be from the guy that you mentioned,
Chambers,
that name a film after 1968 and chances are a Planet of the Apes makeup artist worked on it. Some of the films with Planet of the Apes alumni: Invasions of the Body Snatchers, Star Trek, Jaws, Halloween 2, Blade Runner, Marathon Man, and Forrest Gump. Those are the big ones. I know. And there is one of those documentaries about the movie is just about the makeup. And according to that movie, the makeup took up a third of the budget and 2/3 of the total shooting time.
I can believe that. I mean, I remember I vaguely recall as a kid seeing the documentary, and it was like they were just spending hours in the chair having to get that stuff put on.
There are some pretty hilarious photos from that time, because they would have to have the people waiting around on set, you know, as they all got
so like
up.
smoking, or like they've got a
well, they're smoking in the movie, but like wearing sunglasses, you know, like hanging out on a film set, which they don't do in the movie. And so last couple things were about Heston in particular. So he agreed to sign on to the project before it got firm backing. He was super excited about it. Now, most studios were not, because they thought it would be an unintentional comedy, right? Like these serious scenes with apes,
right?
Especially if you had like a big star talking to apes, that it would just look ridiculous, right? But Heston and the director agreed to do a series of makeup tests. It was the first time Heston ever agreed to do that kind of thing in his career, and that is what sold Zanuck on the project. Another interesting about Heston's involvement is that he was anti-sequel.
Yes, that I did know. I did know that.
And so they kind of cajoled him into the first sequel by at first telling him he would be killed in the first scene. And he agreed to do it.
Yeah.
And then they really begged and pleaded for him to stay for more than just one scene. And he was like, all right, I'll be in the last scene. But the deal is, you got to let me die then, and we blow up the planet. Because he thought that would mean
no more sequels.
They couldn't do any more sequels.
You know what? This is where like Charlton Heston underestimated like the ways in which you can always come up with a sequel. So, or a prequel, whatever you want to call it.
So the Wikipedia entry that I read for this linked back to his diaries, Heston's diaries, and I just want to read a couple because they're pretty great. And now I've not thought of myself as a fan of his because he was a big NRA asshole, right? But he had a personality that I'm now kind of curious about going back and maybe reading more of his diaries. So what did he say? I was dissatisfied with almost everything about the day, though I got a hell of a lot done. I put the fear of God into the studio, read the Apes script.
The Apes 2 script. So the Apes sequel script.
Apes 2 script.
Yeah.
He says, it's actually earlier entry. A colleague is frothing at what he feels are the inadequacies of the Apes 2 script. I'm inclined to agree. I don't know how much can be improved. And then this is just an aside I have to share. I did an acceptable job of supplying the introductions for a videotape series of lectures by Alvina Krauss, who taught acting at Northwestern. I was a little annoyed at having to make still another speech before the ballet tonight when the president of the Bloody Group is Joanne Woodward, whose husband is perfectly serviceable for these kinds of things.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, it was a good ballet.
For those of you who don't know, Joanne Woodward's husband was Paul Newman. So just, I can't guarantee that everyone knows
Perfectly serviceable.
Perfectly serviceable.
Perfectly serviceable.
That's the least you can do tagline. Any Paul Newman movie, Charlton Heston, perfectly serviceable. Yep. I like that.
All right, now
let's get to Chekhov's What's It? This is the thing that appears in the first act of the film that might be somewhat relevant in the third act. What do you have, Anna?
I just said Chekhov's Dirty Ape. I don't know. It's not, I couldn't really come up with much. There is not a lot. There isn't a much of Chekhov's-y things, is there? Like, really?
I like the one I came up with, which was Chekhov's cigar, because that's okay. You see them do that in the very beginning, and then there's that shot of the jailer ape, like leaning back, smoking the cigar, which I actually did laugh at. Yeah. But no, you're right. Like by and large,
it is just a cigar, really.
Exactly. Yes, in this case, it is. Yep.
All right, Dan, do you want to talk about the actual plot, such as it is?
Let's, Anna. All right, we'll start with Act 1, Ashtrays in Space. Meet Taylor, a cigar-smoking, cynical astronaut who thinks very highly of himself and very little about the rest of humanity. His 4-person spaceship has launched on a mission that travels at near-light speed, so time moves more quickly for everyone else as they travel in hibernation. Their ship crash lands in a lake on an unknown planet, with the female astronaut Stewart already dead from a faulty hibernation chamber. Taylor, Dodge, and Landon escape with their emergency gear as the ship sinks. It's the year 3978 according to the ship's chronometer, and Taylor guesstimates that they are on a planet in Orion's Bellatrix system, 300 light-years from Earth. It's a strange planet with lightning and thunder, but no rain. Taylor is an even stranger mission commander, needling Landon repeatedly about how everyone he knows is dead. They find vegetation and then a freshwater lake where they skinny dip. As they are swimming, their clothes and gear are stolen. Tracking the thieves, the astronauts find a cluster of mute vegetarian humans picking fruit from trees. They start to scatter when attacked by apes who ride on horseback and possess firearms and nets. During the melee, Dodge is killed and Taylor is captured after being shot in the throat. Anna, this film has been satirized numerous times, but I confess, watching it this time, I don't know, the scene where the apes capture the humans hit me a little harder than I was expecting. It's actually disturbing to watch, or it was more disturbing than I was expecting. That said, it's still not entirely clear to me what they do with the humans beyond scientific research. I think they were just trying to get them out of eating the corn crops, but whatever.
The corn raw?
Yeah, the raw corn.
I don't just something very funny to me on just munching down on raw corn.
I thought you would have liked the humans in that scene, because I think that is literally the most communistic you see. They're all just picking fruit and sharing with each other. It seemed perfectly nice.
Sure.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, to the extent there's a critique of capitalism in this movie. Mm-hmm. I was not as taken with this movie. Mm-hmm. And I think one artifact of that is I did keep on having questions like, is this a roundup or a massacre? Mm-hmm. Why are they doing this?
Yeah.
I also got stuck on how do they develop the film of the safari that they just had?
No, there's no denying.
Where did they get the manufactured parts for the guns and for the camera?
No. The technology of the Ape Society is all over the goddamn place, right? They have rifles, it looks like. They have photography. They also live in incredibly primitive huts, it seems, and cave dwelling. So no, it's a weird mix. This is where, again, I think I like the film.
Are you willing to hand wave that for them? Are you willing to come up with an explanation?
I'm not going to come up with an explanation, but let me put it this way. One of the things I like about this film, and maybe this is obvious, but it's worth pointing out, is that it's intended to disorient the viewer. From the score to the way the camera is shot. Like, the score is atonal. It's a Jerry Goldsmith score. It's really, really good. The camera at various times, like, literally inverts, so like you're looking at it upside down. I think in that sense, the fact that the technology is all over the map actually works for the film, and that it disorients you.
It's very Civil War in that.
Well, I was going to say, like, there's actually, in that sense, it works that way. Yes.
I will just point out at this juncture that the astronauts are very well muscled.
Oh yeah.
For having been asleep for 2 years.
Yeah, no. Like, there's stuff that we're going to get to the schlock. But let me put it this way. The technology thing, I didn't have as much of a problem with. It's weird.
Oh, I also have no problem that they were well muscled. Yeah. That's great. And they are hot by our standards. There's none of this. Well, there's a little of the, like, less quite cut. They're not.
All I can say is thank God for that. Yes. I mean, Charlton Heston is a good-looking man in this film. That's the way I would put it.
And it's not, you're not in the space of, like, the Chris Evans, like you or Chris Hemsworth, where you have to look like you were like you have zero body fat. I also want to point out is the directing on this movie is the director won an Oscar too, and now I can't remember.
Franklin Schaffner. He didn't win it for this. He won it for Patton.
No. Yeah. But it's a little out there, I think, for an Oscar at this point. Yeah. 68. But I will say kudos to the relatively subtle creative camera work of keeping the astronauts' bits hidden.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of, like, nudity in this film, relatively speaking.
But it's very natural. Like, it's not like they're standing in front of the tree and just happen to have, like, something in front of them. It actually looks very candid.
It doesn't look like they're hiding anything, even though they are obviously hiding something. I agree with you. Yeah, no, that's well done.
Neat trick.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. All right, let's get to Act 2. I'm so jealous there's no human subjects committee on this planet. Taylor finds himself in an experimental lab in an ape city. He is tended to by animal psychologist Zira and surgeon Galen, who helps to heal him. Taylor is rendered temporarily mute by his injury, and his initial feeble efforts to communicate with Zira, her fiancé Cornelius, and others don't work. Zira nicknames him Bright Eyes, believing him to be more intelligent than other humans. As a reward, Zira puts a woman in his cage to mate with him.
And Taylor's like, thanks.
Taylor eventually calls her Nova.
He has no problem with it whatsoever.
I mean, he was a little. He does have a slightly awkward look in the initial thing, and then after that, you're right. He's totally fine with it. Right. Yeah. After that, they're cuddling. Taylor manages to steal some of Zira's paper and write down his name. Zira and Cornelius take Taylor to their office, and he communicates by writing. Taylor convinces them he might know something when he builds a paper airplane, although they don't quite buy his claims to be from outer space. Dr. Zaius, Minister of Science and Chief Defender of the Faith, rejects Taylor's intelligence and later orders him to be gelded. Taylor escapes and wreaks havoc in their Museum of Humans, where he also sees Dodge's stuffed corpse on display. Once captured, his voice finally returns, and he tells the damn dirty apes to take their stinking paws off him. Anna, one of the elements of the film that I actually do think ages remarkably well is the patronizing kindness that Zira and Cornelius show Taylor, because they simultaneously recognize his intelligence, but in no way think of him as their equal.
Dan.
Yep.
Let's say Mimi started talking to you.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Now, if she was otherwise making sense and she told you she was an alien, would you be like, no, that's how.
No, I would totally be.
Like, makes sense.
Yeah, it's the only explanation for what's going on. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
You'd be like, all right, Mimi, what planet? Yeah. Tell me where you're from.
I would not dismiss it out of hand. That's the way I would put that. Yes. Yeah.
And also, things float. Like, their wonder at the airplane is like, I mean, what I will say, like, so this is the thing, I refer to this during our discussion of Civil War. By the way, Civil War Part 2 coming soon. I mean, our discussion of it.
Our special issue. It'll be a special patron-only episode. Yeah.
If a big premise in a movie gets you bought in early, things like what I'm complaining about aren't as important.
But you didn't buy the big premise was the problem. It sounds like
I did buy the big premise, but it just didn't do quite enough for me. But what I realized is that it almost worked for me.
Yeah.
I almost was able to kind of let go. And it's not even like when a big premise works, it's not even that you're part of it is being willing to do the work of the movie and wave hands where they didn't wave hands. But part of it is just you don't care as much, right? And you just don't spend as much time on it. In this movie, almost worked for me that way. And I think I get why it works for other people. And it's the damn prosthetics. It is, they are really, I think that the humanity, as it were, of the apes is what creates it, what lifts that veil, you know, that weight of disbelief just enough to be able to really get into the movie.
Yeah.
You know, I think like there's a good reason why there's a documentary just about the makeup. I think it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it absolutely. No. I live this way. I think it's fitting to note that this movie, represented a legitimate breakthrough in a lot of makeup effects, given that I think it's Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which is the 2011 one, really in a lot of ways, like CGI had existed prior to that film, but that film was one of the first ones where you looked at the CGI and thought, oh, I get this now. This actually seems like a really effective, way to tell this story. And that's, pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're parallel things. And now it's funny to me, just one more thing about that. The makeup is dated, but also it is good enough, and there's something about the whole of the movie that even now, like, it's good enough for a modern day viewer to be able to go with it.
Well, I would say like that also is a credit, by the way, to particularly Kim Hunter and Maurice Evans and Roddy McDowall. Those are the three primary actors that you see. Like, there's a scene at the very end where Taylor kisses Zira, and Roddy McDowall, like, as an ape, like, starts, like, getting his dander up. And again, it's not like a long scene, but you believe that he's an ape in that scene.
It works.
It really works. It's, again. It all right. Now, for those of you who aren't patrons, it's time for our ad break. We'll be right back after this special message for Human Dolls. And we're back.
Mama.
That is legitimately creepy, Anna. That was well done. Well done.
Thank you.
All right, let's get on to Act 3, best monkey trial about evolution ever. A few weeks after Taylor reveals he can speak, he is put on trial. The more Taylor observes the apes... Yes?
It is... Let's keep going. It is the weaker part of the movie.
It's the weakest part of the film. So I have by the way, I want to propose... It is weak. No, it's without question. Leave it this way. This is the schlockiest part by far of the film. And also, I want to propose a new, Space the Nation iron law. I'm going to call this Dresner's Law, which is all space trials suck. This is
except for that of Captain Pike.
Yes, well, okay, that's true. Star Trek accepted. All space trials suck. I'm just gonna put that out there. I'm even thinking about, like, what was it, Moonfall? Do you remember that? That was the worst courtroom scene ever, but not as bad as this one. Frankly, this one is worse.
Even for a society where it doesn't quite make sense, like the society itself is very flawed. It is preposterous.
It's not just preposterous, by the way. It actually ends in a nonsensical way where they're like, okay, and as for the evidence, we're adjourned. Like, they don't even issue the ruling. It was just like, what the hell?
All right, I guess you have to describe it a little bit so people who maybe haven't seen it know what we're talking
Let's put it this way. The more Taylor observes the apes, the more apparent that there's a pretty strict theocratic caste system in which the orangutans are the elites, the gorillas are the military force and law enforcement, and the chimpanzees are mostly scientists and doctors. Ape society and ape law operate along a set of sacred scrolls handed down by the lawgiver, which might explain the sham of a mockery of a trial that ensues. Taylor's best piece of evidence would be his, astronaut colleague Langdon, but he sees that they have lobotomized him. The trial is adjourned with charges to be filed against Cornelius and Zira as well. Dr. Zayas...
The trial... on whatever.
Yeah, we still don't...
adjourned to something.
Yeah, never actually settled. I mean, leave it this way. Cornelius actually brought up a valid point, I thought, which is to say, you can't treat Taylor as something you're charging and then not let him speak. But whatever. And also, by the way, this is the low point, which they apparently kept in the film because it did well with test screenings, but it was like totally improvised on set, is the shot of the, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil.
Speak no evil.
That, like, it's just idiotic. I mean,
the three judges.
Yeah, the three judges do that. And apparently they just like improvise that on set. And I kind of get why. Like, it would have been funny the first time you see it, but like, it actually, I agree with you. That was the one moment where I was like,
you made your fellow actors laugh. Don't put it in the
exactly.
movie.
That's the way I would put that. Dr. Zayas orders Taylor back to his office and threatens him with castration and a lobotomy unless Taylor reveals where he's really from and where his tribe is. He gives Taylor 6 hours to comply. Back at the prison, Zira's nephew Lucius helps to free Taylor, who insists on Nova coming along. They meet up with Cornelius and Zira. Taylor takes all of them back to the Forbidden Zone, a taboo region outside Ape City where Taylor's ship crashed, and where there may be evidence that vindicates Cornelius and Zira's theory of evolution that ape evolved from man. Okay, Anna, let's talk about Charlton Heston and Taylor. I forgot, I will admit, how much of an arrogant prick Taylor is for almost the entire film.
Say all of it.
Go ahead, all of it, sure. Yeah. He goads Langdon, repeatedly and unnecessarily. As you say, the dialogue with Nova, not dialogue, the monologue to Nova about how many women he slept with. Oh, God. And
hey, Dan, lots of lovemaking, but no.
I did. I also laughed at that. That was just, yes. He constantly misses opportunities to actually communicate more effectively. Yes. Also escape. Yes. Like, there's a fight scene where there's a horse right there and he doesn't do it. Like, that's not on him, but like, that's just bad directing. That said, by God, Charlton Heston knows how to choose some scenery. I think he's magnificent in this role. I really do. He's fantastic.
He is. I did have a thought during it, which is that, how, so like in The Shining, the kid didn't know he was in a horror movie.
Yeah,
and then like in Bowfinger, Eddie Murphy doesn't know he's in a movie at all.
Right.
I was like, did they tell Charlton Heston that he was in like in a different movie in some way? Like it's so big. Oh yeah. It's such a big performance. Yeah. And the other actors who are acting through makeup, prosthetics that are as thick as a fist are doing a more subtle job, right? Like, yeah. And that said, he's magnetic.
You cannot, I kept thinking actually weirdly of Will Smith in Independence Day. It's the same kind of thing. It's just like, it's a movie star performance,
It's a movie star performance. I do want to quote, I was going to leave some of these quotes to Debris Field, but since you brought up the speech he gives.
Oh yes, please do.
Lots of lovemaking, but no love.
Please do.
Stewart, the female astronaut that died. I can barely say this. It's actually so offensive. Yeah.
Which is why you're going to say it, not me.
Yeah, she was to be the new Eve with our hot and heavy help. Probably just as well she didn't make it this far.
Okay, now. Like this, that actually did take me out of the film. I had this in my Debris Field. I want to be very. Let's accept the movie as given. Hold on. No, beyond the offensive nature of what he said.
There's. Oh yeah, no, I agree. Go on.
So let me get this straight. The idea is that Taylor is saying we're going to escape. We're going to create a new Eden, and we're going to do this with 3 men and 1 woman. Buddy,
math is wrong.
I got bad news for you. About the way that procreation works. And like, it's just, that is a bad set of decision making. Like,
It's just, the math is poor.
Yes.
That is
some very bad risk assessment. That's all I'm going to say.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Masculinity so toxic, you bring 1 woman.
That's the tagline on it. I think you've managed to arrive at it. Yes. All right, let's get to final act. This has been
our hot and heavy help. I almost gagged. Like,
I winced.
I
winced. I did. It was. You know what? It was cringe. That's the best. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, there you go. The kids say
the kids got that one right. Okay. Oh, by the way, that does remind me. I was legitimately amused. Again, talking about dated, elements of it. This idea that like Lucius was supposed to represent the youth demographic.
Oh, the kids today.
Yes, the kids today.
Yeah, like, don't trust anyone over 30, Lucius. Yes.
Which did raise the question of how long these apes could actually live, but that's a whole separate conversation.
I like you should have said, don't trust any ape over 30.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, if they're going to like have so much fun with, another problem with the movie for me is with just flipping idioms. You know
what?
like,
it would have worked if they had done it once or twice. I mean, there were a couple times where I actually did think it worked, but mostly it doesn't. I agree with you. It's just so, it's like the elbow to the ribs. It
takes you out of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. Like the one time they did it that I liked it was when Zira tells Taylor, look, all humans look alike to apes. And like that I liked. That was a good one, I actually thought. But
yeah, and that works into whatever the weird racial politics of this movie are, which let's close
the plot. All right, let's get to Act 4. This has been The Twilight Zone. Reaching the Forbidden Zone, the group arrives at a cave where Cornelius had conducted an earlier dig. They are intercepted by Zaius and his soldiers who were expecting them. Taylor holds off the apes by threatening to shoot Zaius, who agrees to enter the cave to see any way that they can disprove his theory. Inside, Cornelius displays remnants of a technologically advanced human society predating simian history. Taylor identifies the artifacts such as dentures, eyeglasses, an artificial heart valve, and a talking human doll. Zaius then admits he has always known about ancient human civilization. The guerrillas ambush Lucius, and Taylor again holds Zaius hostage unless they provide a horse, provisions, and ammo, so Taylor can search for answers. After Taylor and Nova leave, Zaius orders the cave be blown up to destroy the evidence and charges Zira, Cornelius, and Lucius with heresy, which kind of seems like a dick move.
Charges again. Are they going to have another trial like they did before?
That's just painful.
Are they going back to the same trial because they just adjourned?
That's true. That's true. Hadn't fully. Yeah. Meanwhile, riding along the coastline with Nova, Taylor sees the remnants of the Statue of Liberty and realizes that he's home. He takes it all in stride. I was waiting for that one. Yes, okay. He does not take it all in stride. It's Heston's greatest scenery chewing moment in history. Okay, Anna, does knowing the ending?
Good thing they recorded on location.
That's true.
Because scenery would be gone.
Yes. Does knowing the ending? Because again, it's well known what the ending is. Does it rob it of its power, or is essentially all the satires of this film stripped it? I know you didn't enjoy this film quite as much as I did. I do think it qualifies as one of the greater plot reveals in the history of sci-fi. And actually, one of the things I admired in the beginning is that, and again, it's not surprising, Taylor's enough of an arrogant prick that he thinks he knows where they are when in fact they're not. So, watching this film going in, you wouldn't think that it was Earth.
Wait, Dan. Yeah. It's supposed to be another planet. How did the Statue of Liberty get there?
Oh, Anna.
That's my question.
Oh, Anna, I'm sorry. I have some bad news for you.
So that is actually a really common troll, and it is pretty fun. I mean, I'm immature enough that there's a couple of different Reddit threads when someone poses this question in an apparently earnest way, and there is a little bit of a thrill to get people very well-meaning explaining what the plot twist is. And you're trying to do it with me.
I know. I get it.
No, I knew we wouldn't fall for it. I knew that I had a feeling that you would not believe that I believed that. As I said, I think that there are a lot of pleasures to this movie, enough of them, and it's an interesting enough movie that you can know what's coming and it's still good. And I think most people, even if they've seen that clip, are unprepared for Heston.
You can't handle the Heston.
You can't handle the Heston. I mean, because it's a build.
Yeah.
And part of it is, what makes this truly a Rod Serling joint is that it's a classic Twilight Zone ending for the asshole to get the comeuppance this way.
Yeah.
He spends the first third of the movie talking about how there must be something better than humans.
Right. He's disgusted with humanity, thinks he's better than all of them. Yeah. He's got a superiority complex.
And so it's very Serling-esque to kind of come back and be like, don't you miss humans now? Huh? Or actually, I guess, for him to be upset, even though it's humans that blew themselves up.
Right. No.
He does say you did it. You
maniacs.
You
finally did it.
You maniacs. So I guess he's still disapproving of humans, but his chauvinism is deflated. I
want to, again, I actually think weirdly that as much as, again, it's massive scenery chewing, but it's the one time that he realizes, oh my God, it does work because he's been this arrogant prick for the entirety of the film. And then suddenly he's just brought low. And that, in some ways it's a good performance. I also want to give Heston one other like little nod in terms of his acting. In this final act, there's a brief moment where, if you remember, he shoots and kills one of the guerrilla soldiers. And if you look, there's a nice little moment where he winces after that. And that was a great little moment because it indicates he recognizes he took a sentient life. And it actually shows the way that Taylor is adapting and realizing I should, killing someone is bad.
And I think that's supposed to be what happens with that very awkward kiss, which, like, I don't know. I mean, at least he asked.
No, that's what I was going to say. I was in my debrief. I was like, he's putting in the work now, Anna. At least he asked permission. Yeah,
he's like, consent is cool. Yeah. I think, just to kind of restate, because I want to be clear about why that ending works as a very Serling-esque Twilight Zone ending, is that he is both, his ego is punctured and he's right at the same time, right? He's right that humanity did end itself and perhaps deserves some disdain, but at the same time, he is in grief about it, whereas before he seemed to sort of glory in the idea of humanity meeting itself.
Right. The first act version of Taylor would have laughed at that, and he doesn't in the end. And I think you're right. And that, to the extent, I think, still gives the film enough, some gravitas that. And
it's a testament to Heston that you get both of those things.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But, Dan, I still have a question for you.
Oh, please, Anna, ask away.
Is there IR in this little film?
I don't know, Anna. I mean, experimental brain surgery is one thing, and I'm all in favor of it. But the kind of behavioral studies you're asking me about are something else again. But I'll take the risk and say that there is undeniably some IR in this film. In fact, there's a whole bunch of IR in this film. The first and simplest version of the IR is the realism, which is to say that there's a reason Dr. Zaius is behaving the way he is. And Taylor goads him about this, saying that, he fears him because he's a threat to ape society. The idea that humans would eventually become so powerful or, such a danger that apes would have to actually go to war. Turns out there's some secret scroll that says that. That was also a little vague, by the way, or like what we're supposed to know. And then also, like, another moment of realism is the moment Taylor is finally armed, the moment he gets a gun. It's actually a nice little scene because the relationship with Cornelius and Zira shifts a little bit, because up until that moment, Cornelius and Zira are sort of see themselves as being in charge, and suddenly they realize they have to deal with an armed Taylor. And Taylor's not going to shoot them necessarily, but he's not necessarily going to follow their orders either. And so, again, just sort of, question of cooperation among anarchy. And then there's the constructivism in the film, because in a lot of ways, I think what's so interesting in this film is the utter failure of intersubjective understanding. Taylor, for almost the entirety of the film, cannot view apes as equal in terms of intelligence. And it would be safe to say that the apes certainly reciprocate that feeling. And in some ways, what was interesting was there's a moment in Dr. Zaius' office where they've been calling Taylor Bright Eyes, during the idiotic trial. But Dr. Zaius finally says Taylor. And Taylor says, "Thank you for using my name." And again, it's a rare moment of sort of like a recognition of, you recognize that I'm actually a sentient, being worthy of some dignity. And in some ways, that's what actors, according to constructivism, sometimes want in international politics, which is some degree of identity, some degree of ontological security. And what's interesting about this film is that because you introduce a sentient human, that represents a risk to the ontological security of apes. And of course, the fact that you have sentient apes is an ontological risk to Taylor, which is why he acts the way he does. I think that's about it. Yeah.
I will try to tell a brief version of a story that I really love, which is that, so the AA meeting I go to, there's a halfway house nearby. Mm-hmm. And so it gets a lot of people who are recently incarcerated. And I was at a meeting a while back, and I think I can keep this all really general, so there's no anonymity issue. There was a young man who was saying how he's been coming since he left and moved into this halfway house for like a half a year or something. And that this would be his last meeting because he was going to move back in with his girlfriend. Very excited. That relationship had been healed. Very excited for kind of this next part of his life. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how much he loved the meeting. And he said, because this is the first time in years when he came to this meeting that people called him by his first name.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that makes me get teary thinking about it, but it's the dignity.
It's the dignity.
We don't think about that when we think about the ways that you are stripped of your humanity or stripped of who you are when you're incarcerated, when you're under the thumb of others. Just to call people by their last name. It's not like it's an intention. Well, who knows if it's intentional or not, but just the dignity of being called by your name.
Yeah. Well,
that will live with me.
Excellent. Oh, Anna, this reminds me. I have a question to ask you.
Dan, what is it?
Is there a critique of capitalism in this film?
Dan, do not turn this hearing into a farce. I told you that I don't know if I can continue doing a critique of capitalism for every film. But that said, this movie was written by a blacklisted writer. So there's got to be something, right? Got to be something. But there's just not a lot of capitalism in this movie. That could be the critique. You know, it does seem like the Ape Society might have money.
I think they do, because there's that one conversation where Lucius is trying to free Taylor, where he talks about how, like, he's going to be sold to the circus or something, if you remember. And then, like, you know. Yeah,
but there's very little. And there is a caste system. Yeah. That's for sure. Oh, yeah. And also the humans seem to have been undone by maybe a nuclear war. And that, of course, you know, war is an aspect of untrammeled capitalism. But humans are also shown to be humans through their possessions, which, I don't know, I guess you can't say that's bad. But I think the thing that I get stuck on sort of cultural criticism wise with this movie is like, what the fuck is going on with race? Like, what? I don't have an answer here. Like, it's very weird, right? Like, one of the astronauts is black, and that's cool, and it's just sort of, it's very matter of fact. It's not like,
which is fine. Like, that really was
commented
right,
on.
exactly.
Yeah, totally. And that's kind of advanced for the time, right? That's like a very open, you know, casting. But then, like, you have racial divisions in ape society, right? Like, that's the caste system. Like, I think that's supposed to map.
No, and
race. I don't know.
No, I think so. And it's talked about, like, how the chimpanzees are finally getting to do stuff that previously they hadn't been allowed to do.
Yeah, and there's a quota system for the chimpanzees, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And then also there's the line about, like, all of you look alike to us, which is a classic, like, racist kind of line to say. I mean, I just don't know. Like, it's I'm throwing up my hands.
I think, unfortunately, the better critique of capitalism is the sequel, is the fact that they did the sequel, and then after that managed to come up.
Adorno wept, man.
It's the third film that is truly the Adorno, like, you know, they're like, okay, we're going to find a way to, like, bring the apes back in time. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine this is one where Heston and Adorno could have, like, had a beer together and been like, yeah. And then not said anything else to each other the entire evening. Just, like, agreed that there should be a Planet of the Apes sequel.
Now I want to write a little one act play.
I'm trying to do German accent.
Well, Adorno, I guess I have to agree with you. On this one thing.
I would like to see your one act play. Heston and Adorno.
Heston and Adorno have coffee at
Heston and Adorno at the Five and Dime.
I was going to say Heston and Adorno at Planet Hollywood. That would have been the, you know, that would have been great. Okay.
All right, Dan, what next?
Well, let's get to, you know, our newest section, which is, we refer to as the least you can do. You know, you may have noticed on occasion that Anna or I, usually Anna, damns a movie with faint praise. Praise that would be very funny if it were actually on a movie poster as an endorsement. Anna, do you have any such faint praise for this film?
The makeup effects are very good for their time. How about what an ending? Or I got a better, even better. I enjoyed the ending.
Oh, man.
There. That is it. That's it. I enjoyed the ending. Anna Marie Cox.
That's good. That's good. Excellent. Well done, Anna.
All right.
It's time for Discordant Notes. This is when we take questions from our patrons that they ask us on the Discord and answer them within the podcast. All right. Our first question comes from Jeff L., who asks, is The Simpsons a Fish Called Selma episode? This is the one that features Troy McClure starring in Stop the Planet of the Apes, I Want to Get Off. The best
Dr. Zayas. Yes,
the best iteration of Planet of the Apes IP. Anna, what say you?
I mean, it's hard to think of a better. I mean, like, having not seen the other movies, maybe the other movies will, like, blow me away, but it's pretty great. I mean, There is a reason why it is the most well-known, IP from this movie.
I don't know if it's the most well-known, but like, yes, it's.
Well,
yeah.
I think it might be as well-known as the follow-up movies.
See, this is where I wonder if this is a Gen X artifact.
Maybe not internationally.
No, this is, I think, legitimately a Gen X thing, because like for you and I, this is part of our like cultural DNA.
Canon.
I don't know if it's necessarily the case for for younger or older, particularly for younger folks. But I will say it is hands down the funniest. I mean, the ape breakdancing is just hysterical.
It almost upsets me that The Simpsons is still going. Like, I feel like it's one of those things where I want to freeze it in amber, like when I stopped watching it, I think, which would have been, I guess, 25 years ago, 20 years ago.
Close. Yeah.
But if you haven't seen The Simpsons musical, A Planet of the Apes, then please.
It's on YouTube. It's not going to take much
look
effort.
That up on YouTube.
Yeah.
It is pretty delightful.
Yeah. All right.
That's a comfortable silence that falls between friends, Dan.
All right. Second question is from Zach. What is the artifact that, upon witnessing its destruction, would make you fall to your knees, rave like a lunatic, and punch the ground? I have two answers for this. The first would be my favorite dim sum restaurant, just because I would miss the food, or Fenway Park, one of the two.
Is that the place you took me, Dan?
It is the place we took you. Yes, I did take you to that place. That's true. It's a good delicious. Yeah,
in Fenway Park. That's a good answer.
Yeah. What about you?
And I don't have a jokey version, although I guess that's not jokey. The dim sum, you would be legitimately upset.
I would horribly. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
A somewhat serious answer, although if you gave me time, I could probably come up with several other things. But the Rothko Chapel at the Menil Collection in Houston is, I think, of like sort of big C culture things in my world, like one of the most dear to me. So
that's nice.
Do that.
Okay. Oh, wait.
We're landing.
Yes.
Or something.
Yeah.
Some kind of melons falling off a tree.
It's the debris field.
This
is where we talk about the things that, we might not have mentioned previously. Actually, I think in my case, I got to pretty much everything that I have in the debris field now. What about you, Anna?
Oh, all right. Yeah, I mean, we got to the stuff that's really gross that I wanted. Oh, I have stuff like, for a primitive society, they have pretty nice pens.
Also the paper. This is where you're right.
And no shortage of paper.
Yeah.
Literally have here, Dan, no shortage of paper. Which in a primitive society is, you usually paper is pretty, dear. Yeah. So I've got that. There is a very Heston moment that made me laugh, which is that he maniacally laughs at the U.S. flag.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's supposed to be funny. It's wild. It goes on for a while.
I will say this. This might sound weird, and admittedly, it was 1968. I actually think it was probably pretty transgressive to have that shot of an astronaut laughing at the American flag. I mean, again, nowadays it wouldn't raise much of an eyebrow, but again, this is where that would probably pretty risky, or might have been a risky move to do in the 60s. Just saying.
I do have I love a pouty teen chimp. That's pretty. I kind of liked Lucius.
Yes.
And there's some lines that are pretty funny. The "do not turn this hearing into a farce" is probably my favorite. I taught you to smile. We already mentioned. Yeah. There's some stuff that's so bad that it's good. Of course, he does not know our culture because he cannot think. This is part of the trial thing where it's the trial is not just the weak part. It's confounding in a way. You have to just not think too hard about it.
Yeah, it's, the trial is bad enough to drag people out of the movie. There's no denying that. Yeah. And
it also makes the apes, sounds weird. It makes the apes look bad.
You know what? That's the real problem. The lack of believability. There was no ape PR. There was no one whispering to Dr. Zayas this is a...
Well, I just meant not even they're, of course they're bad because they're going after poor Taylor and Zira, but also they just don't make sense. Right. It's just what it would be. it would be better for the movie for them to have a point to this
Yes.
trial, for there to be like a codified law of some kind that they were trying him for, you know, and not just like,
we are all in this room so we can all pontificate. Yes. I will say,
because he does not think, which makes no sense at all.
In some ways, and this is, I will grant you, is a weakness, because like actually in some ways you have two sequences like that. The first is that scene, and then when they're all in the cave, it happens again, at least when they're in the cave, that exposition makes sense. The trial, I agree with you, it's the weakest part of the film. Yeah.
All right. That takes care of it for me. Dan, I got to get to my next viewing of Civil War. So we're going to have to wrap this up pretty quickly.
We've only got one last question, Anna. Is it schlock or awe for you?
I mean, we went through this. It's schlock with a side of awe. I think it's the writing, although, as you've pointed out, the writing it's the day of, you know, it's not ad-libbing, I guess, but like a lot of the stuff that seems pretty weak is apparently stuff that was added pretty late. So,
as I said, I think this is all with a heavy dose of schlock, but I see where you're coming from on this, and I think we've roughly arrived at the same place, is the way I would put it.
Earth, Dan? We both arrived on Earth.
You maniacs! Sorry.
Okay. You enjoy that. Everyone does. That's how you know enjoy it. That you are identifying as a male if you enjoy screaming that. That is one way to know where on the spectrum you might identify. Do you enjoy play acting as Charlton Heston?
That's fair.
You might be a male identified person if. All right, Dan, let's close this out.
You know, we are both on social media. You can reach us on Blue Sky. I am at Dan Dresner. She is at Anna Marie Cox. I have a Substack called Dresner's World. Anna, I believe you now might be on Substack. Is this correct?
I have a Substack. It is called Civil War Every Day, where my neurodiversity becomes your inbox clutter, because I'm turning my hyperfixation into a limited edition newsletter, which I've now figured out, like, maybe this is how newsletters work for me. I've always like been loath to start one because I'm a serial obsessive. And so maybe I just will have like 100 different newsletters over time, because this one's not going to last forever, but it's basically going to be like my thoughts about Civil War, you know, news about Civil War, like reviews of Civil War.
Why the reviews of Civil War are
wrong.
wrong.
Of Civil War.
Right.
Why the reviews of Civil War are wrong. Some reviews that I like. Some of the, you know, hits and misses from the press tour. If that sounds interesting to you, I also think that the one thing you might be interested in, Dan, besides I know you'll subscribe just because you like to hear from me whenever possible.
Yeah.
You're ravenous for my thoughts, and you don't get enough of them. Is it possible to have enough of Anna Marie Cox talking at you? I don't think so. Is that I do plan on having... Dan is laughing uncontrollably, people. It's not on mic, but he is trying to form the words to protest, but he can't, because it's true that he cannot get enough of my opinions. He wants more of them.
Keep going on. Please proceed, Anna.
Dan is very much my work husband. I might not be his work wife, and we don't actually work together, but Dan has to hear everything that I'm thinking. That's
actually one of the nicest things you've ever said to me, Anna. I actually appreciate that.
So, but one of the things that you might be interested in is I do plan on putting in as a section of the newsletter is like shots fired, which is to say like things that are happening right now.
Oh, good. That are like potentially,
like, for instance, Wired magazine sent someone to a convention of constitutional sheriffs. I don't know if you've heard of that, but they're kind of like the sovereign citizens of the law enforcement world. So unfortunately, it's not going to be all fun and games. It'll be a little bit of seriousness, but I do also look forward to maybe, Dan, you contributing a thought or two on what songs should be on the Civil War soundtrack, which is one of the other sections I plan on having.
I got to think about that. That's an interesting question.
I've got two.
Okay. Yeah.
Gang of Fours, I Love a Man in Uniform, and Sonic Youth Cool Thing.
Okay. Gonna have to listen to these.
Those are pretty good suggestions. All right. Is that it, Dan? Become a patron.
Yeah, become a patron.
It's April, and then it'll be MAPE.
Our next episode will be, if you're
it,
a patron, we're going to do a special follow-up episode on Civil War. If you are not a patron, our next episode will be War for the Planet of the Apes.
All right. Until then.
Keep this channel open for more.